you everyone for joining this webinar between D3 Security and iZOOlogic on automated brand protection. Okay, without waiting any longer, just a quick housekeeping check. So the webinar is going to be recorded and it will be available on demand. So if you need to drop off for any reason during the webinar, we'll definitely share the link with you. We will have a live Q&A at the end, and I would encourage you to stay back for the Q&A. Please feel free to ask questions either during the Q&A or as they come up in your mind. You could always type them into the chat. We will give out maybe multiple vouchers for people who ask good questions. So it's not just one voucher, and I'm sure that all of you will have great questions for our panelists today. Okay, so without any further ado, I would like to welcome Benny to this webinar. Benny, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Thank you, Amardeep. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Benny Epand. I'm a technical account manager here within the business team. Been working, as you can see, quite a long time in cybersecurity in the defense world. Been with iZOOlogic now for 5 years now. Enjoying every minute of it and happy to be here. And plus, I see I matched my my hoodie with Pierre, so I think I'm in the right place.
That's definitely the sign of a good partnership. Okay, Pierre, do you want to go next?
Sure, thank you. My name is Pierre. I'm the product marketing manager here at D3. Previous to this, I was working with our clients helping implement SOAR. So I worked with enterprises and MSSPs, was able to untangle integrations, build out playbooks, deploy them, see the results. And so now, yeah, I work on the business side, and I'm excited to co-present what this integration between iZOOlogic and D3 can do.
All right, so iZOOlogic is a digital risk protection company. Our goal is to protect our clients from fraud, phishing, and all kinds of digital threats that we see today. We're a full-fledged service company, so that means that we are performing both actions of detecting and finding the threats, sanitizing them for the clients, and then we also perform the threat mitigation, meaning that we will take down those threats from the web. In essence, we'll see some threats later on with Pierre, but we can imagine when someone's pretending to be your organization, they're using your login page, your name, your logo across any of the platforms we can see on the web. iZOOlogic will be able to detect those activities. Of course, we'll report them back to you, and then we will make sure that that threat is removed from the web. By removing that threat, of course, we're mitigating, preventing your clients and users from accessing those locations and reducing the risk from that fraud or event that is occurring. As you could see here, this could be different kinds of threats, of course, and those platforms don't, the threat actors will activate on different locations. So if they're trying to impersonate your domain, creating a fake mobile app, what we call rogue applications, maybe uploading it to one of those official stores on Google Play, we could see APKs being abused all the time, right? So iZOOlogic will want to find that, make sure that that APK of yours is the single legitimate APK presenting your company and not any other. Of course, we also provide advanced phishing solutions, and these help us combat those direct phishing attacks at the client's customers. So maybe for a bank, and then they're creating a login page trying to harvest their credentials. So we would want to detect those as soon as possible, and we have solutions which could detect as soon as that login page goes up live on the web. iZOOlogic will find it, of course, and then begin that takedown time. And as we operate a 24/7 SOC team for these takedowns, we could see those threats being removed within 3 to 4 hours, which is a great result given that this, phishing threat, every minute is up means more of your users can be affected by it and be losing their credentials to these threat actors. Of course, aside from protecting you over the surface web, we will also provide you with threat intel and threat advisory. These will be, of course, related to the latest news, CVEs, and industry updates that you may need to protect your organization. But we will also add to that threat advisory and direct data loss recovery from the dark web, from the deep web, where your data, in whatever method, this can occur, if it's a data leak, a third-party leak, or maybe some kind of employee that's not happy with his previous organization would leak out that data. We would find it wherever that location is. Even something as simple as a repository on GitHub that someone forgot to close correctly, we'll find those locations and help you mitigate the threat that arises from that location. Two last things that we do in this space of the digital area. We will do digital asset management for you. This covers asset discovery, asset management, attack surface monitoring maybe is one of those keywords or buzzwords that we hear lately. So making sure that your network facing the web is clear to you, you know exactly what's going on. If there's any shadow IT or anything like that, will help you find it. And of course, if those locations have any threats or vulnerabilities, maybe an open port, will help you detect that. And then, of course, we can mitigate that by shutting down those issues that we find. We could also assist you with monitoring your website, checking if there's any defacement on it, any issues with that web application. Maybe someone has entered some malicious code into the website, then we'll find that by scanning your location 24/7. Lastly, we do third-party risk management. Today, I think we see this coming up quite a lot, where regulators around the world are starting to request from users to monitor these third parties, as they are the ones that usually lose our sensitive data. So iZOOlogic can monitor these third parties or vendors of their organization, see if they have a secure environment, any threats exist for them. Maybe they're known, you don't know this, but we find, some data leaks that have occurred to them in the past. By giving you this intelligence, you could then come back to them and say, hey, if you want to receive our sensitive data, you need to fix ABC, put these mechanisms in place. And by that, you can make sure, or at least audit those vendors and make sure that their security level is as tough as yours, to reduce the risk as much as possible. Yeah, I don't want to take too much time from Pierre's demonstration. So just to give a short demonstration how that service would look in a day-to-day life for you. iZOOlogic's goal would be first to find the threat, right? So if we are detecting the threat across one of those locations, let's say social media, our systems will be collecting all the newly registered profiles, pages, groups in that platform. And we'll search those and see, are any of these relevant to the brand we're protecting? Of course, once the system detects, pulls that in, it will present it to an analyst here at iZOOlogic. So we have analyst teams that focus on each of these different areas. They will perform that forensic analysis on the threat before we send it over to you. So you're not receiving loads of URLs with false positives. Maybe some of them are down, or maybe it's just a waste of your time looking at something that's just similar to your name, but is not a threat to the organization. And you also want to know, what is that level of threat, right? How quickly do you need to be responding? Is this an emergency, or this can be taken care of it at a later stage? So by our analysts doing that initial work for you, you are reducing that amount of time you need to spend on each threat. And usually we're just looking for you to say, yes, please take it down, or no, this belongs to us. Can you please whitelist that? And of course, we'll see that with Pierre very soon. So once you confirm that takedown process, our team will move to the legal enforcement, contact that third party or the host that is hosting the malicious content, and have them remove that for us. Of course, our goal is always to do that as soon as possible. That's why we have a team that works 24/7, and they're constantly in communication with these third parties, making sure that threat goes down. Once, of course, a threat is removed, we'll continuously monitor it, make sure if that threat comes back up for some reason, maybe a year later, that domain is registered once again, and then that threat will occur. So we want to be on top of it as soon as that happens. So we'll continuously monitor that threat landscape. Yeah, thank you, Amardeep. Thanks for that time.
So I'll talk a little bit about how adding automated incident response to the tail end of that can help. So in IBM's cost of a data breach report in 2023, they found that the time to identify and contain a breach is typically 108 days quicker with automation than without. A lot of this is because the incident response process is burdened with manual and repetitive tasks. Some reports suggest up to 50% of the incident response process could be automated. So some examples of tasks that where automation can bring a lot of value are logging and documenting incidents, managing and configuring security tools, responding to false positives, and manually correlating data from different sources. So when we build out incident response playbooks inside of the platform, we typically work with the customer to wireframe what their current incident response process is, and we'll focus on the top 2 or 3 threats that are taking the most of their time. So phishing is usually one, password spray attacks or authentication related alerts is usually another one. We'll ask you which security tools you're working with, and then based on the integration commands that we have available for those security tools, or potentially what other API endpoints that partner has that we aren't tapped into yet, we come up with a list of possible automated commands that we could run from the SOAR platform. And then we turn that into a workflow, so an automated diagram of your current incident response process. We typically don't fully automate the whole process. It's usually a kind of like a hybrid approach where we're collecting information, showing it to the analyst, allowing them to make a decision on how to proceed, and then assisting with automation afterwards. We can go to the next slide. So this is also extremely relevant for managed security service providers. Within D3, you can, there's native multi-tenancy, which lets you scale out from day one. We don't charge for additional tenants or anything like that. You can plug and play any security tool your customers may use. So if you're a Microsoft shop, you can support customers that aren't necessarily fully Microsoft. And you can, with the kind of playbook that we're going to show you today, you can add brand protection and threat analysis to your list of services using the integration with iZOOlogic. And below, we just have a quote from one of our customers who say they can work much faster now. A lot of their work has been done in advance due to the integrations and automations. So a lot of the tier 1 and tier 2 people in their SOC only spend their time making key decisions on how to handle different security events. And so this is really the true value that we look to secure for all of our clients. And so in this demonstration, we'll be taking a URL detected and flagged by iZOOlogic, and we'll be pushing it through 3 stages of an incident response playbook. The first is verification. We're going to check and make sure that this is a legitimate threat. The second one is enrichment, where we're going to be querying a combination of the 5 security tools you see below: CrowdStrike, Microsoft 365, Entra ID, Zscaler, and VirusTotal to get more context on the alert. And then we're going to move into containment, again, building off of an analyst response to the playbook. So I can jump into the demonstration now. Okay, you should be able to see the investigation dashboard here.
Yeah, I see it.
Great. So here we have a list of alerts that have been ingested from iZOOlogic. The first step for any SOAR platform is obviously to set up ingestions. So this could be a EDR alerts, email alerts, SIM alerts, or in this case, these are some of the suspicious URLs that have been flagged by iZOOlogic. So these are some of the raw fields that we've extracted and normalized. If we ever want to go and look at the raw data, we can go to the event log here. We can see the incident ID to search for it within the iZOOlogic console. We can see the threat level that they've classified it as. And then down below, we can see some additional information such as the registrar name and IP address of the site. So if we want to work on this, we can hit escalate. And we'll select which incident type. We'll give it a name, which is, we'll call it potential brand abuse. And then we'll select the playbook for it. We have the iZOOlogic incident playbook here ready. And since it was flagged as critical in the raw data, we're going to leave it as critical and just hit escalate. Once we hit escalate, we'll see that the event has been now linked to an incident. And at the incident level is where we see the playbook that runs behind the scenes. So if we come here, we'll see some of the automated tasks that have triggered. I'll just zoom out real quick to show you an overview. So like I mentioned, we have the verification stage here, and then it moves into enrichment in the middle. And then these purple tasks are conditional tasks. So we're going to ask for some feedback, some manual input, and then it's going to trigger, it's going to determine which of these paths we're going to go down here, especially at the end. So in the verification stage, what we're looking for first is a list of URLs from our network security tool. In this case, it's Zscaler. And here we have a list of URLs that have been whitelisted. So we can check that against the URL in question, which is Chase Bank XYZ. And we can see that that's not in the list. So the conditional here, in this case, it's automated. So it triggers false and it moves into the enrichment stage. The enrichment stage is going to start with a conditional task where it's going to ask the user if this is an internal asset or if this is a potential threat. Depending on our answer here, it's going to trigger either the top and bottom workflow or the middle workflow. The middle workflow is designated for internal assets. Now, executive view as the playbook. Okay, we can walk through that in a little bit. But Benny, maybe you want to touch on a little bit about the scanning capabilities of iZOOlogic in the event of an internal asset. Let me pull up the workflow actually so we can talk through it.
Sure. Yeah, while you're raising that up. So when we talk about internal assets for the client, let's say some new website was created or for some reason it wasn't under the scanning until now, you would want to scan that location. If there's a web app on it, a web application, you want a website, you want to see, are there any threats or vulnerabilities for it? Is the technology stack updated? All the ports that should be opened are open and those that shouldn't, you know, what's going on there. In addition, we could check what subdomains are created, what IPs are created under that asset. Maybe some of them are not known to us. So really anything new you want to make sure as soon as possible that you know what's going on in that location. So you could secure it and then also decide, are we going to continuously scan this or not? You know, a lot of times when this happens, Pierre, it's what we call shadow IT, right? We should have known about that location, but for some reason we don't. So there might be some actions that you would want to do as soon as possible. So by immediately starting that scan and not waiting for some manual intervention or anything like that, you can automate that whole process and get your results as soon as possible, because that scan, you know, it takes time. You still need to run the systems on it. The system needs to scan it, deliver the different payloads and see, you know, what are the vulnerabilities and threats. Yeah.
Right. So in that event, we can assist with that process where we're checking if the asset has already been scanned, in which case we'll pull in the details for you. Otherwise, we'll submit the URL and request a new scan on it. Then it just runs through a loop here where there's a delay of 24 hours to get the scan results. And it verifies and then verifies that the scan is complete and then sends the details to the investigator. So let's go back to the incident we were working on. Come back to the investigation dashboard. We can go to our incidents and we should see our iZOOlogic incident right at the top here. Flag is critical. We'll go back to the playbook where it's asking if this is an internal asset or a threat, potential threat. In this case, we're going to say potential threat, and then it's going to move on and trigger the enrichment workflows. So the enrichment workflows have two paths, one at the top and one at the bottom. At the top, we're going to search Office 365 to see if the URL has been sent in any emails. In this case, it gets tagged as true. And then we look to get all emails from that sender to see if this is a one-off or if this is part of a larger campaign. And then we get the activity logs from Azure Active Directory of the user to see if there's any suspicious login activity, and then the reputation check on the sender. So in this case, it's just the d3security.com domain. And a similar process happens down at the bottom here, where first we're going to use open source intelligence to get the reputation of the URL. We can see a summary of the data here. In this case, it's been tagged as a low risk level. So perhaps this is a newer asset. It has been flagged by the wider community yet. And then you can see the results, obviously, of all of the individual repositories that VirusTotal queries. Here we can also check CrowdStrike, so our endpoint security tool, to see if there's any activity to or from the unauthorized URL. In this case, we're using the IP address of that URL that iZOOlogic gave us, and we're looking for any hosts that have communicated with it. In this case, we can see that no, this IOC has not been found inside of our logs. So that's a good sign. In this case, we're also querying Entra ID, our identity tool, to see if the registrar name is perhaps an employee. In this case, of course not. Looks like this is GoDaddy, so we're not going to get any results from here. But this is one way for the security team to check and make sure that whether or not this is a legitimate asset. So I'm just going to switch over here. Now we have the check if asset is internally owned. A lot of the time in the incident response process, it requires input from various team members. Say you're a global company, you have teams operating all over the world. Some teams may be spinning up new websites, new emails, new social media profiles, new promotions, etc. And just obviously they wouldn't think to keep you in the loop. So here we can send out an email to some of these various teams and ask for their verification. Hey, is this an asset that you're running or is it not? So this will send out an email to us. I just switched over to my email. Can you guys see it, or is it still on the application?
No, we can see your email.
Yeah.
You can see it? Okay.
Just imagine if you had to do all these process up here is showing us right now for each case that we report. Some clients face thousands of cases a day, and you might miss out if you don't do this activity, or you're saying, oh, it's an external phishing page. I don't think I need to do all these checks. And then you may be missing out on something. Maybe there is a threat in there to the organization as well. Or you could enrich it by doing extra checks that you wouldn't have done on such a threat. So it's a really powerful way of adding more insights and making sure you left no stone unturned, right? Even a phishing page, that could affect you as well. And any check you do will just make sure. And if it's automated, why not? Okay.
Yeah. And so this is a way that integrates with your email system. It can also integrate with Slack or Microsoft Teams. But here it's just going to say, hi, Pierre, please verify whether or not your team owns this asset here. Please select approve if you do. Otherwise, we'll initiate a takedown of the site. So I'll click on this link here and just want to double check. Can you guys see the form? Yep. Okay. Yep. So anyone can respond, this is not our asset, and then hit reject. So once they hit reject, this input is going to be recognized by the playbook. You can see that it goes, this task now moves forward, and we use the user's response to classify it as either, yes, this is ours, where it'll go up and it'll add the URL to the whitelist in iZOOlogic, and then do the same in Zscaler, and then close out the incident. In this case, it's been tagged as a potential threat. So we move into the containment stage, where we run a few various actions. At the bottom, we're adding the URL as an IOC in CrowdStrike. So if any logs do pop up, that activity is going to be flagged. We're going to have a separate alert pop up for it, and then we can go and we can run some remediation either on that user's account or that device, or maybe we need to update our firewall settings again. And then here we've added the URL to the blacklist in Zscaler because, as we saw in the verification stage, it's not already there. And then up on the iZOOlogic side, we're going to initiate a takedown of that site, which Benny spoke about earlier on. And then a loop happens where we're waiting every half hour. We're going to check back to see if that site is still active or not. If it is, we're going to re-request the takedown. If it's not, we're going to close the incident and tag it as resolved. So this is one example of how you can use half a dozen different security tools inside of an incident response playbook to complement your manual processes. Again, we're not particularly trying to replace decision making with this. We're just trying to make sure that all of the data collection activities that you may be doing or not doing because it's just out of your way are those tasks are brought to the forefront and taken care of for you right away. Yeah, Benny, anything you want to add?
I think it's like you said, sometimes it's just out of the way and you won't do it. But we can imagine the demonstration we did was on a phishing page, but this could be an internal asset or a subdomain that was discovered, or maybe a phishing email that is sent into the organization. Of course, that we could put this whole playbook on any type of threat and make sure that we're getting the most out of it by this process. Yeah, I think it's great.
Sure. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, thank you. And so with that, I will hand it back to you, Amardeep.
Okay. Sorry about that. I was talking and I didn't realize that I'm muted. This was a great demonstration, guys. This is obviously, a very important topic that hadn't been spoken about enough. And no matter how much we speak about it, it is still not enough because organizations face threats and they face threats every other day. And there are people out there trying to get into your systems, trying to gain access, trying to send you phishing emails. And these takedowns, man, oh my God, I'm blown away every time I see these demos. This is just such a great service that, you guys offer, and building automation along with it to take care of these threats. I think every organization around the world needs this. It's not a question of, if they want it, they need it. It's a need. And the only question I have is that how are they dealing with it currently, if not automating already? So I know that I have a lot of questions. I always do. But there are some questions that came our way. And while you guys were talking, and I want to kind of just touch upon those quickly. I think the first one, Benny, is how do you perform the takedowns? And I think that's more a question for you to answer.
Yeah, sure. And yeah, just to follow up on what you said, Amardeep, unfortunately, we won't rename that organization, but you could see threats are live all the time. And this one is live, I think, for a bit more than 24 hours. And it's just something that there is something you can do with it, right? We don't have to just accept it as is, right? If it's a social media fraudulent page, you can take care of it. So yeah, how do we do that? We will contact that third party if that was GoDaddy that we saw over there, or if it's a threat over Facebook, we'll contact Meta, report to them in the correct fashion. We know what is the process they work with. They know who we are. They've been working with iZOOlogic for the past 10 years. So when they get an email request from us, or if we call them and say, hey, we need this website to go down right away, it's affecting our client, they know what we're talking about, and we have that trust with them since we've been doing this for quite some time. So our team will make that initial request. They'll submit any documentation that is needed. There might be some trademarks involved, some copyrights. All this our team will be doing. So the client doesn't need to do any of this process. It's all done by our team. And then, of course, we would want to be the ones to follow up, make sure that threat is removed. Maybe there's need for additional information or additional evidence. Then iZOOlogic's team will be the one to create all of that, be in contact with that third party while updating the client on the process and progress of that takedown, and then eventually get to that end result of having that threat removed, of course. So yeah, do the whole process, make sure that threat is down, and then also monitor for any resurfacing threats. Yeah, thanks for that question.
Okay. The other question, Benny, is how does iZOOlogic determine which URLs are relevant to the customers? Like, do we work with your team to create a list of URLs? How does that work?
So the first stage in any onboarding would be to create a whitelist of that client's assets, digital assets. So these would be any domains owned and operated, any social media locations. If we're protecting an executive within that organization, so that executive may have his own little whitelist, right? Maybe they're a little Twitter star or something like that. We see a lot of CEOs who have kind of this personality on the web over social media. So we want to know what are their legitimate activities. All these will go into our own, the portal that we're operating. And then we know this belongs to the client. Everything else will start to be suspicious for us. Usually in the first month, we'll find all those that maybe have gotten away from the security team. Clean those up very quickly, add them into the authorized list, the white list, and then we'll start scanning for those threats. We know exactly what those threats would look like, what does a client's operation looks like, and then we could match them. The system can match it to those fake sites that we find. And of course, that would also help us categorize it correctly, right? The more it imitates the client's source code, or if they're using the client source code in the first place, which is something we can detect, then you can imagine that threat level would be higher, and the incident would be of higher criticality, of course.
Okay. The next one, I guess, is probably for Pierre. The question is, do you have an integration with SentinelOne?
Yeah, we do. SentinelOne is one of our larger integrations. So in terms of integrations, most security tools will have APIs for developers and partners. And so as a SOAR company, we're often tasked with building integrations for our customers, and no one customer has the same tool set as the next one. So we're always researching new security tools, APIs, building out commands, updating existing integrations, making sure that they're working and they're resilient. Yeah, we typically do a lot of that work for our customer. If there does happen to be a tool we haven't integrated with before, we'll make sure that that's taken care of during the onboarding process. So by the time you're live, your playbooks are all functioning and it's got all of the capabilities that you need.
Okay. It seems we don't have any more questions. So Benny, I'm going to make a question of my own, and you can choose not to answer it if you don't want to. But I'm curious
Will you be awarding yourself with the voucher as well?
No. This is more for my, for my scrapbook, really. So
Sure.
I'm very keen on knowing, over all these years that you guys have been doing this, I'm sure there are situations and takedowns that you dealt with. Which would you say has been your most memorable? And if you don't want to share names, it's fine. But tell us a story.
Oh, wow. That's a good question.
Thank you.
Actually, the best takedowns, and we're doing one just today, are more those pro bono takedowns that we do quite often. Today it's for a church in the UAE.
Okay.
I've been there so many times, and I just wasn't aware of these communities. And they're just facing some social media issues, account takeover, and someone's posting things they shouldn't be doing using their account. And we unfortunately come across such activity quite a lot. And those are always, you feel very good helping out to the community in such cases. We've also been in touch with some CERT teams across the world. And, what they told us last time is, you're protecting the banks in our country, right? The largest organization, but no one's protecting the citizens. And the citizens called us. We had a removal of shaming activity or personal videos that are being uploaded by someone in a relationship. And we take those down because it is abusive and it is private information. But if you're a regular citizen and you're trying to speak to someone at Facebook or at a host like Amazon or GoDaddy, it's very hard for you, right? You don't know who you're going to talk to. So we've been helping a lot of those kind of takedowns. And it's always great to help just someone from the community, you know.
Okay. That's amazing. I think what you just shared is also, you know, speaks volumes of the work that iZOOlogic is doing, you know, not just for commercial benefit, but also for the community. And hats off to you guys for that. I saw a
Thanks.
question come into the chat, and I'm going to read it out. And that's probably going to be the last question that we'll take on today's webinar. But if you have more, you can always email us, and we'll get your response. So, having said that, the question is, in your experience, have you encountered a scenario where you requested a takedown and it's not been entertained, and the customer only wants that domain, and how do you convince the customer? So it's a mixed question. It's there in the chat too.
Yeah, I'm looking at the question. Yeah, thank you for that. So we have two scenarios that we might be facing here, right? Sometimes the registrar is not agreeing with us, or unfortunately, sometimes we see the registrar may be a criminal activity of his own. We see that in different areas of Eastern Europe sometimes, or with what's going on with the war today in that area. Sometimes they're just not entertaining at all and saying, you know, our courts are open, you're entitled to come and visit us. So when we have such threats, our usual mode of action will be to contain that threat within that geolocation. Make sure, so if you're a bank in the US, we'll make sure that that threat can't be accessible from any US locations. Of course, we will involve authorities, and we have taken down some crime rings that, you know, are hosts or registrars on their own. Those are also fun to take down, Mardeep, from your other question, because those are entire operations that you are removing.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, if there's a customer issue, I think that's, maybe another discussion, but there are legal methods to contest a domain ownership. We can guide and help the client with that process. We have some good people here at iZOOlogic who are experts in the domain world, and then guide them through that process, help them take ownership of that domain, or at least mitigate and monitor it. So if any threat does come up on that domain, we're there to take it down when it does.
Thank you so much, Benny, for being with us today, and for, you know, making the time to talk to all of the people who tuned in about this very important use case for security practitioners around the world. Thank you, Pierre, for painstakingly putting together that demo and all the hard work that you did working with Benny behind the scenes to show us that great demo today.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks,
and now
Pierre.
that I've thanked our
you
panelists, thank you to everyone who tuned in. I hope you guys have a great day, and if you have questions or would like to get in touch, we are happy to connect with you at any time.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone.